The morning of November 7th, 1944, brings with it a weight that no one could have foreseen. 12 P-38. Lightning fighters cut through the skies of Yugoslavia in perfect formation, their twin silhouettes reflecting the light of dawn. But who commands this squadron is not a simple pilot. It is Colonel Marcus Thorne Whitfield, a man whose reputation precedes his arrival at any airbase. His eyes scan the terrain below with the precision of a predator, always searching, always calculating. Then something catches his attention. A column of white steam rises from the valley like a smoke signal, thick and unmistakable. It is not the designated target for this mission, but Whitfield knows an opportunity when he sees one. A German steam train. His fingers move over the radio with the confidence of someone who has already made decisions that cost lives. "Boys, let's grab that toy." His voice echoes through the headsets of his men, and there is no hesitation in his tone. Whitfield tilts his aircraft with surgical precision, and his 12 pilots follow him like a shadow. The speed increases. The train grows in his gun sights. His fingers close over the triggers, and the sky explodes in fire. 50 caliber bullets tear through the air, and the German locomotive is transformed into an inferno of metal and steam. Holes appear all over the boiler, and steam escapes in white clouds that cover the landscape below. For a brief moment, it seems like a perfect victory, but war never offers perfect victories. The Germans respond with a ferocity that no one expected. Black flak explosions burst around the formation like flowers of death, and steel shrapnel pierces the thin skins of the American fighters. The sound is deafening, a constant thunder that makes the pilots shrink in their seats. Whitfield shouts an order that will be heard by all. "Get down, everyone to the ground now." But not everyone can obey fast enough. One of the P-38s is hit directly, and what happens next is something that no pilot ever forgets. The aircraft transforms into a fireball, spinning out of control through the air like a broken toy. The desperate voice of the pilot echoes through the radio, a scream that freezes the blood of everyone who hears it. "I'm hit! I'm going down!" The transmission is cut off by static, and Whitfield does something that few commanders would do. He levels his aircraft low over the trees and turns his head back, desperately searching for his man. But what he sees is not a parachute opening. It is a fireball colliding against a rocky slope, exploding in a cascade of flames that illuminates the mountain. The silence that follows is louder than any explosion. Whitfield asks over the radio, his voice now different, carrying something that goes beyond military authority. "Does anyone see a chute?" Each pilot hopes that another will respond with a yes, but what comes is only emptiness. "Negative, sir." In that moment, something changes inside Whitfield. Anger is not an emotion he feels frequently, but now it burns in his chest like rocket fuel. He copies the message, his voice controlled but lethal. The P-38s roar over the Serbian mountains, and Whitfield knows that revenge is near, but he does not yet know how terrible that revenge will be. If you want to know what happens when anger clouds the judgment of an experienced commander, leave a like and keep watching. The American fighters continue their route, flying low over the rugged terrain, when suddenly the ground disappears beneath them. A massive valley opens up, and in it is exactly what Whitfield was looking for: an airfield. It is not just any airfield. It is large, well-organized, and appears to be full of activity. Seconds later, his eyes capture something even better. A long column of military vehicles moves along the road leading to Belgrade, trucks and tanks in perfect formation. Whitfield does not hesitate for even a second. His mind has already made the connection. This corresponds exactly to what was described in the mission briefing. This has to be the German target. There is no shadow of doubt in his mind, or at least that is what he believes. There are those sons of bitches. "Blue Squadron, get that German convoy. Red and yellow to the airfield." His men respond in unison, "Yes, sir," and the formations divide like a blade cutting through butter. But below, in that valley that Whitfield believes to be enemy territory, something completely different is happening. The 8th Soviet Army and Yugoslav partisans are celebrating the anniversary of the October Revolution. It is a moment of joy, of camaraderie, of hope. The soldiers sing as the trucks advance, red Soviet flags fluttering in the wind like symbols of victory. They have no idea that they are about to become victims of one of the greatest cases of misidentification in World War II. The Soviet soldiers look up to the sky when they hear the roar of engines. They see the P-38s in the distance and smile. They are their American allies. The celebration continues, the voices rise in songs of victory. But then something changes. The fighters begin to separate from the formation. They begin to turn directly toward the column. One of the more experienced soldiers shouts a warning that no one wants to hear. No, no, they are going to strafe us. Panic begins to spread, but it is too late. The P-38s descend like vultures, the roar of their engines becoming louder and louder, deafening. The few Soviet soldiers who realize the mistake desperately grab flags from their comrades and lift them as high as they can, waving them frantically, hoping the Americans see, hoping they understand. But there is not enough time. The American pilots do not see the flags. Or perhaps they do, but it is too late to process. Their fingers are already on the triggers. What happens next is a massacre. 50 caliber bullets tear through the Soviet column, cutting down men and machines like a scythe cutting wheat. The sound is indescribable, a constant thunder of death. Soldiers fall, vehicles explode, and what was a celebration transforms into a hell. Then come the bombs. Massive explosions tear through what remains of the column, sending flames and smoke into the sky. Bodies are thrown through the air. Vehicles are transformed into burning scrap metal. The carnage is complete and devastating. At the nearby airfield, the lookouts hear the distant explosions. The sentries stand at attention and see something that freezes them with fear. A swarm of American fighters flying directly in their direction. "Man the guns!" the alarm sounds, and Soviet soldiers run to the anti-aircraft defense positions. The guns come to life with a furious roar, and tracers cut through the sky in desperate attempts to hit the invaders. Whitfield leads his men in a dive that he believes is against a Luftwaffe airfield full of Bf-109s. Anti-aircraft fire sweeps through his formation, hitting the fighters, but no one stops. 20mm cannons and 50 caliber machine guns pour fire from the P-38s, their projectiles tearing through the earth, destroying rows of parked aircraft. But what Whitfield does not know is that every aircraft he destroys, every soldier who falls, belongs to his own ally. And in just moments, the price of this confusion will be paid in American blood. Second Lieutenant Eldon Coulson is an experienced pilot, someone who has survived dozens of combat missions. But on this morning, luck abandons him. As the P-38s pull out of the dive, Coulson tries to do the same, but his aircraft does not respond. It has been hit severely by Soviet weapons, and the controls are becoming heavier and heavier. "She's not coming up," he shouts over the radio, his voice betraying the panic he tries to control. Coulson pulls the stick with all the strength he possesses, his muscles trembling with the effort, but the aircraft continues to descend. It descends much lower than it should, and this places it directly in the sights of the entire anti-aircraft defense of the Soviet airfield. More impacts strike the lightning. The wings are shredded, the elevators are torn apart, and control completely escapes his hands. Coulson knows he is lost. He knows there is no salvation. The P-38 falls like a stone, and when it hits the ground 1 kilometer from the airfield, the explosion is so violent that it leaves a crater in the earth. Coulson dies instantly, his body consumed by the flames. Whitfield sees the fireballs from the sky. He sees his man disappear in an explosion, and the anger that already burned in his chest transforms into something far more dangerous. He does not know that he killed his own ally. He believes he is facing the Germans, and that belief will cost more lives. "Gain altitude and attack again," Whitfield orders, his voice now carrying a thirst for revenge that clouds his judgment. Below, anti-aircraft fire continues to shoot skyward, still believing it is facing German FW-189s, reconnaissance aircraft that should not be attacking anything. But the Soviet pilots know that something is wrong. They run through fire and smoke toward their Yak-9s, aircraft that are their only hope of defense. Lieutenant Alexander Krivonogik is one of the first to reach his aircraft. He is an experienced pilot, someone who has already faced the German Luftwaffe many times. His wingman, Junior Lieutenant Shipulya, is right behind him. As they taxi down the runway, Krivonogik looks up and sees the fighters turning for another attack. "Shipulya, faster!" They line up on the runway and push the throttles to maximum. The Yak-9s roar down the runway, their engines screaming with effort, and take off into the air with the terrifying sight of enemies approaching above them. The two Soviets fly low over the trees, accelerating to well over 400 kilometers per hour, trying to escape the sights of the P-38s. But behind them, the rest of the Soviet pilots do not have such luck. They take off in a large group, and for Whitfield and his men, they are easy targets for a squadron that has already lost 2 men and is thirsty for revenge. "Get those fighters before they gain altitude," Whitfield shouts, and his men do not question. They dive at maximum speed, being hit by anti-aircraft fire coming from the ground, but with their sights on target, they pull the triggers. Bullets and projectiles tear through the Soviet Yaks. One is destroyed instantly, and several others are damaged. They scatter in evasive maneuvers as the lightnings pass overhead. But one of the Soviet pilots sees his attacker pulling out of the dive and identifies an opportunity. In a fraction of a second, he pulls his Yak upward and squeezes the trigger. The P-38 flies straight through his burst and is shredded. The aircraft explodes in flames and spins violently out of control. The pilot inside is Second Lieutenant Philip Brewer, and he has no opportunity to escape. He is trapped, and his plane falls to the earth, colliding northeast of the Soviet airfield. Whitfield sees from above where 1 enemy and 2 friends burn, but he does not know that the enemy was an ally. He does not know that his men are dying because of a misidentification that should never have happened. Comment below, do you believe Whitfield will discover the truth before more men die? The P-38s gain altitude, escaping the grasp of the anti-aircraft gunners. Whitfield looks down where 1 enemy and 2 friends burn, but he does not know the truth. He believes he is winning. He believes he is avenging his men. "Many fighters incoming. Form a defensive circle. We're shooting our way out," he orders, and his pilots obey. Meanwhile, Krivonogik and Shipulya race low over the trees, accelerating to well over 400 kilometers per hour. The attack on the rest of their squadron has left them isolated, but they see the enemy fighters opening fire on the helpless column below, and they know they have no choice. They must attack. The 2 Yak-9s pull up into a steep vertical climb. At this moment, for the first time in history, fighters of the United States and the Soviet Union will face off in all-out air-to-air combat. "Shipulya, attack! I'll cover you!" Krivonogik shouts over the radio. "Roger that!" Shipulya accelerates in pursuit, sweeping in at high speed, and opens fire with his single 20mm cannon and 50 caliber machine gun. His bursts land on one of the P-38's twin fuselages, but it is not enough to bring it down. Shipulya soars by at blistering speeds and turns away to prepare for another run. But the American pilot requests backup, and 2 circling P-38s come to his rescue. Krivonogik spots the enemies diving upon his wingman and shouts over the radio, "Shipulya, maneuver, break right." It is just at the nick of time. Shipulya pulls hard in the last second, escaping the P-38's lethal burst. He twists and dodges the enemy aircraft's guns, but he is on the back foot. "I can't get rid of him." "Hang on, I'm coming!" Krivonogic flies into the scene as fast as he can, his heart pounding with every burst of tracers launched toward his wingman. He is coming in fast. His crosshairs line up with one of the two lightnings, and he pulls the trigger. His gunshots streak across the sky and narrowly miss the enemy aircraft. The American pilot immediately abandons the attack, but Krivonogic ignores him. He moves on to the next P-38 hounding Shipulia, takes aim, and opens fire. His rounds are perfectly placed and hit the Lightning's twin booms, bursting the aircraft into flame. It flies on, out of control. The American pilot opens the canopy and bails, and his burning plane crashes 8 kilometers north of the Soviet airfield. "Thank you, Commander." "You're welcome. Prepare to fight." Both brace for an onslaught. They are horribly outnumbered, but then something changes. The rest of the Soviet squadron bursts onto the scene, opening fire and scattering their enemies. Krivonogic is relieved. Victory is now within reach. The two pilots rush into the fight again, but in the chaos of battle they get split up. Krivonogic sets his sights on an enemy and chases him through the melee, spiraling upward through the air. The P-38 does the same. But the P-38 is not optimized for low-altitude flying, and Krivonogic quickly catches up. He has the American in his sights. On the ground, a Soviet anti-air crew are firing at every enemy target they see. Whether it was just bad aim or an over-enthusiastic gun crew, we will never know, but they send a volley directly at Krivonogic's yak. He gets no warning. His yak is struck directly and disintegrates. Shipulia tries to raise his friend on the radio and sees the burning wreck plummeting down to the ground. His friend is gone. But Shipulia does not have time to process the loss. Above him, more P-38s are approaching, and he is alone. Shipulia shakes the loss from his mind and spots an American target underneath him. He is outnumbered, and now without his friend, but he still dives back into the fight. P-38s swarm around him. One of them performs a steep climb, stalls, and then opens fire. Shipulia has no chance. He flies straight through its fire, and he is shot down. The burning wreck of his plane crashes 500 meters north of the airfield he was defending. Soviet losses mount. Another yak is shot down by the Americans. Soviet forces are desperately contacting every nearby base, hoping for reinforcement. Rushing to the scene is a fresh group of Yak-3 fighters, led by Captain Alexander Koldunov. They are responding to the airfield commander's desperate plea for help, but Koldunov is unsure of what he will find. He has been told he is fighting German FW-189s, but he knows the 189 is a reconnaissance aircraft. It is not used for attacks like this. Something is very wrong. Approaching the battle, he sees what is before him is not an FW-189. That is the unmistakable shape of an American P-38. His eyes widen in shock. He quickly abandons his attack and roars alongside the Americans, wagging his wings, hoping the Allied pilots see the red stars. "We are allies!" he shouts over the radio. But instead of recognition, the Lightning slows, gets behind, and turns to fire. Damn it! Koldunov breaks into evasive maneuvers and escapes the furious volley. "Come on! What are you doing?" He once again flies straight through the chaos, trying to capture the attention of the American pilots. But it does not work, until he flies right alongside Whitfield. Whitfield sees the Soviet plane, and his eyes go wide. A cold sense of dread travels down his spine. He looks around at the other aircraft zipping by around him. Every single one of the so-called enemies is sporting the red Soviet stars. The realization hits him like a punch to the stomach. His mind struggles to process what his eyes are telling him. The aircraft he has been attacking, the soldiers he has been killing, the allies he has been destroying, they are all Soviet. All of them. The weight of this understanding crashes down upon him with the force of 1,000 bombs. His hands begin to shake on the controls. His voice, when it comes, is different. It is not the voice of a commander anymore. It is the voice of a man who has just realized the horror of what he has done. Holy shit! Cease fire! Cease fire! They are Soviets! Everyone back to base! Now! Repeat! Everyone back to base! Now! All of the P-38s turn west and flee the scene, but they are chased by the Yaks. All pilots, let them go! They are allies! One by one, each Soviet pilot turns back to their base, and the terrible accident comes to an abrupt end. But the end of the battle is not the end of the story. It is not even close. The reality of what happened is only beginning to settle in. Whitfield feels the weight of what he has done. His men died. Soviet men died. And it was all because of a mistake. A mistake that should never have happened. He knows that when he returns to base, there will be questions. There will be investigations. There will be consequences. The P-38s fly in silence back to the base, each pilot lost in their own thoughts. No one speaks. No one needs to. They all know what they have done. They all know that they killed their own allies. And that truth is heavier than any bomb they have ever carried. When they land, there are officers waiting. There are questions. There are accusations. But Whitfield does not try to defend himself. He knows there is no defense for what happened. He knows that he made a mistake that cost lives, and he will have to live with it for the rest of his life. If this video impacted you, share your opinion in the comments. How do you think Whitfield should have handled this situation? The incident is taken by some in Soviet high command to have been a deliberate act. For a brief moment, the fallout of the incident threatens to spiral out of control. The tension between the Allies, which was already fragile, threatens to break completely. There are talks of retaliation. There are talks that the Americans deliberately attacked Soviet forces. The situation is explosive, and any spark could transform it into a fire that would consume the alliance between the two countries. But then, the Americans do something that saves the situation. They admit the mistake. They send an explanatory letter to the Soviets that details the sequence of events that led the Americans to believe they were fighting the Germans. The letter is carefully written. It explains how intelligence was misinterpreted. It explains how the airfield was incorrectly identified. It explains how the column of vehicles was confused with a German convoy. It explains everything. And by explaining everything, the Americans avoid what could have been a massive diplomatic crisis. The Soviets, although furious, accept the explanation. The alliance is preserved, but only by a thread. The truth, however, is more complicated than the letter suggests. There are details that are not included. There are contexts that are omitted. There are truths that are softened to protect reputations and careers. The Soviet account, although probably exaggerated, is released over the years. Stories are told. Legends are created. But American information on the incident is very scarce. Many believe that the full account of the incident has been kept secret and remains classified until 100 years after the event. Documents that could clarify exactly what happened, why it happened, and who was responsible are locked away in government archives, far from the eyes of the public. Whitfield is never tried. He is never convicted. He is never publicly punished. But he carries the weight of what he did for the rest of his life. He knows that he killed men who were his allies. He knows that he made a mistake that cost lives, and that truth is a prison from which he can never escape. His men also carry that weight. They flew on a mission that they believed was against enemies, only to discover that they were attacking their own allies. Some of them never recover psychologically. Some of them leave the Air Force. Some of them live lives of silent regret. War is already traumatic enough without the addition of knowing that you killed people who were on your side. But that is the reality of what happened on that day in November of 1944. It is the reality of a mistake that changed lives, that killed men, and that almost destroyed an alliance that was crucial to victory in World War II. Historians continue to debate the details of the incident. They continue to question the decisions that were made. They continue to search for answers in classified archives that may never be fully revealed. But one thing is certain: the incident of November 1944 is a reminder of how chaotic war is, of how mistakes can have devastating consequences, and of how even the best and brightest can make errors that cost lives. It is a reminder that war is not glorious. It is brutal, it is confusing, and it is often tragic. Decades pass. World War II ends. The survivors grow old. Some die taking their secrets to the grave. But the story of the November incident remains, a silent testimony to a moment when everything could have gone wrong. Whitfield lives to an advanced age, but he never speaks publicly about the incident. When asked, he offers only vague answers. He does not want to be remembered for his mistake. He wants to be remembered for the years of service he gave. But history does not let him rest. Researchers continue to investigate. Historians continue to write. And slowly, the truth emerges, not in its entirety, but in fragments that paint an increasingly clear picture of what really happened. The incident becomes a case study in military schools. It is used to teach about the importance of clear communication, of accurate intelligence, and of double-checking information before taking actions that can have fatal consequences. It is used to teach about the dangers of assumption, about the risks of acting on incomplete information, and about the need for confirmation before engaging. But above all, it is used to teach about humanity. It is used to teach that even the best among us can make mistakes, that even those with the best intentions can cause harm, and that war, in its essence, is a chaos where truth is often the first casualty. The Soviet pilots who survived the incident are honored as heroes. They defended their airfield against what they believed to be a German attack. They fought against impossible odds, and some of them died in the process. But their story is often overshadowed by the American narrative. Their courage is often forgotten. Their sacrifice is often ignored. This is part of the tragedy of the incident. It is not just that men died. It is that their stories were lost, their names were forgotten, and their courage was erased from history. Whitfield dies in 1988 at the age of 85. His obituary mentions the incident briefly, but does not go into detail. He is remembered as a dedicated military officer who served with distinction during World War II. But those who know the truth know that there is more to his story. They know that he carried a burden that was never fully relieved. They know that he lived with the knowledge that his mistakes cost lives. And they know that that truth haunted him until the end. Today, more than 80 years later, the incident of November 1944 remains one of the most intriguing and tragic episodes of World War II. It is a reminder of how unpredictable war is. It is a reminder of how mistakes can have devastating consequences, and it is a reminder that even in times of conflict, humanity must prevail. There must be communication. There must be verification. There must be confirmation, because the cost of not doing so is simply too high. It is the cost of lives, it is the cost of destroyed families, it is the cost of lost stories and forgotten heroes. The story of Whitfield, of Krivonogic, of Shipulia, of Coulson, of Brewer, and of all the other men who died on that day is a story that must be told. It is a story that must be remembered. It is a story that must serve as a reminder that war is not a game. It is not an adventure. It is a brutal reality where consequences are measured in lost lives and destroyed families. And it is a reality that should never be forgotten. If this video impacted you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next war stories that explore the moments that changed the course of history.